Good evening, welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Thursday, October 24th, 2019. Tonight's agenda, we have two executive session topics that will be coming up. One doing strategy and preparation for negotiations for non-union personnel, and the second discuss strategy with respect to litigation. Then we were hoping at 6:30 to start a joint meeting with the Finance Committee to review the articles that are coming up at town meeting. Due to traffic outside, two of our members are not here right now. Some of the items in the executive session, we need them here for final choice, so we'll try to be back at 6:30 if possible. We need a motion to go into executive session. Hold on, I can pull it up.
Yeah, I would, could you
Want me
do
just to
that?
do it?
Yes, please.
You have it there?
Well, I have something. Move that the Board of Selectmen enter into executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to conduct strategy in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, and the chair so declares. Police Chief pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation as opposed to an open meeting discuss strategy with respects to litigation, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on litigation, and the chair so declares. The Board of Selectmen will go into executive session and will convene in open session thereafter.
Sorry. Motion was made and seconded. Ms. Napoli?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste? Aye. Mr. Knox? Aye. Thank you. We'll be back as soon as possible. Hopefully.
Again, Joe, sorry I buggered up the executive session. Sorry I buggered up the time of the executive session, made you guys wait.
Welcome back to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Thursday, October 24th. We're all done with the executive session. We're going to go have a joint meeting with FinCom to go over articles in the upcoming town meeting. First, Mr. Clerk, if you'd lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go ahead and mix them with us up here. Is that a payment?
Fill out a form.
You know, that's on TV.
My mail got delivered to his house somehow by accident. Oh, is it in?
Okay, welcome. Is the chair of the FinCom? Are you in session?
I am right now, yes.
Okay.
We have a quorum.
If it's okay with the FinCom, Gary, I think Cindy already talked to you. We're going to go out of order probably and do anything dealing with the water department first.
Sure.
Okay. Do you guys want to come up? Or?
Sure, we'd love to come up. Dave Ketchin,
Hey, everyone.
Assistant General Manager.
No, I've met him before.
It's for the town, it's for the people watching. Mr. Chairman.
Tom doesn't like it up there?
I asked him to come up and say, no way, no way. We got Dave, he says.
Okay, which article? We starting with 9?
9, yes. So for Article 9, there's language that we have worked out with town council. I believe that there's some suggestions that perhaps might come up tonight about certain language relating to the district and the expansion of the district. And I also understand that you have prepared the presentation for that article, which actually, no, you've prepared the presentation for 11 and 12, yeah, which we'll get to.
So if you want me to take over, Mr. Chair?
Sure,
So-
Chair.
Thank you. So we had a commissioners meeting last night in regards to, obvious, the same thing you guys are talking about, articles coming up on Monday. I spoke to Selectman Napoli earlier in the day in regards to two things, actually, with the home rule petition. One of which was some language that was asked to be included We talked about it, and I believe town council was briefed, and there was better fit for that language in the MOU. So the commissioners last night, we took a vote, and we approved that language as written to be added to the MOU. So it's up to you guys. If you want to add it, we're good. We took the vote last night authorizing the additional language.
It's just that one sentence.
That is so nicely highlighted, thank you.
My pleasure.
And I have seen this today. I have no problem with it at all.
Right, yep.
If the board's prepared, then I would recommend that the board vote to sign the revised MOU, unless council thinks that we need to somehow rescind the prior MOU.
No, you can just vote to amend it with this language.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded to add number 7. Do I have to read it, or?
Sure.
Might as well read it. Yeah.
The Board of Water Commissioners shall ensure public hearings are held in a location that will accommodate at least 75 participants and vehicle parking for all public hearings.
Perfect.
Motion was made and second. All those in favor? Aye. All right.
Fantastic. So the other portion of Article 9 we spoke about last night at our meeting was, we had taken a look at the home rule petition, made our markups, sent it back to you all. Then there were additional markups made, and all of which were fine. What we had one concern about was the add-on in regards to expansion of the sewer district, and going back to anytime there was a town, an expansion request or need, it would have to wait till town meeting. We had discussion in regards to, well, what's that mean to us, if we're running a sewer district? A couple points that came up. Highway Department's doing a local road, pick a road.
Russell Street.
There you go. Gonna be doing major construction on Russell Street. Sewer line runs right by. Doesn't it make sense, if we're gonna be ripping up that road and reconstructing that road, to include sewer? If in fact, all the public hearings are held to ensure that, folks on Russell Street are involved and are aware of what's happening, and we just expand the district by that road. That was one issue. The other issue is, it's a very fluid, I shouldn't say, it's a very fluid operation, right? We're not the first sewer district to come online. There are thousands of them throughout the Commonwealth. When we run our water district, we don't need to go back to town meeting. We want to run it the same way as we run the water department. So we're asking that prior to town meeting, we just make that, strike those, that additional wording in regards to expansion going back for authorization at town meeting. If you all agree, commissioners last night talked about it, that's what we'd like to see, because we didn't know this change happened until very, very recently, so we weren't aware of it, so we didn't have a chance to deliberate or come back and talk to you guys prior to town meeting until last night. We talked about it, said, okay, if, for us, the ideal situation is strike that language or just remove that language, we're good to go. If in fact you as a board disagree with that, we're okay with Article 9 with it. Ideally, we would rather it without. We would still support Article 9 as written. So,
Please.
The reason, and I voiced an objection when you guys sent your draft in and made Nick aware of it immediately, goes back to when we structured this thing originally, it was the engineers who brought to our attention that you can't just play with the contours of the map, because it's not the whole town, and and the betterments and everything else are factored in on how many properties are paying for, the infrastructure and all the rest of it. So I think I wouldn't change that until we had some more guidance as to how that's implemented, because it may even be that there is regulation that speaks to it. So, we just add properties or streets onto a list where somebody's paying a betterment and a charge based on math that was done on an earlier number of units, then, everything gets skewed. Or you're giving people the right to come in and say, hey, I want abatement and all that because you added 10 units, and if it's not, as I recall it has to be done, expansion is anticipated, but it has to be done in kind of logical, thoughtful chunks so that the math can be adjusted every time you add properties. So, they're better done in once or twice a year chunks than on a rolling basis.
I understand what you're saying. I can see your points. But again, I believe that there are systems out there that operate the way we want to.
Well, let's find
work-
that out.
And work out those finances, and that's what all the public hearings
Okay.
and public meetings would be about, to notify citizens and possible users as to exactly what's happening and exactly what we're gonna be doing,
But if
so.
there are systems out there that operate differently, then I would rather start from the safe position that we were advised on and change it after we come into that information, rather than presume it's okay and leave ourselves in a position to have to correct the mistake after the fact.
Again, the commissioners would rather the language be taken
You're
out.
not
and
even
that's-
addressing what I said.
Well,
Then how does it
I am,
affect-
Paul. I mean, are we gonna be right out the gate perfect? I don't think that expectation is, that's what we wanna be, but, the finances and,
Yeah, but
their
people-
numbers,
People hook up, sign contracts,
okay?
and, it's big math. Mm-hmm. So then, but it's all predicated on a certain number of users. So now, someone signs a contract, they write their check, 2 weeks later, you add a bunch of additional properties. Well, how do we treat that first person?
It's like our hookup fees for water,
But it isn't.
It is, because today's hookup fees are different than yesterday's hookup fees, okay? So, it's just like any other enterprise. Money changes, times change, costs change. So, you have to go with whatever's current and whatever is happening within that fiscal year. So, again, the position of the commissioners are, we are in support of this article, all right? We voted for it. We want to see it successful. We want to see the smart sewer project successful. It just may, again, it's up to your board. If it goes forward that way, so be it. It may, we come back later on and say, you know what, we need to have an amendment to this law, the home rule petition, a year down the line, 2 years down the line, or whatever the case may be. And we realize that.
My argument for keeping the approval of town meeting in there for now is that I would like to be able to show the town a highly functioning system before, and then say, listen, it's working, we're doing it as intended. We would like to now amend this and take a little bit of control away from town meeting so that we can administer it more effectively. But I think showing right now that before town meeting relinquishes all of that control, we're willing to take the first steps with them having more authority and agency. With the ultimate plan of, frankly, doing exactly as you laid out, ultimately pulling it back and say, this is just a utility. There's nothing fancy or special about it. It's just a different flavor of utility. I like that slightly incremental approach because I think it's more likely to garner the support of town meeting if we show them that we're willing to include them until they're comfortable with it. I do think the long-term plan should be to treat it like every other utility and nothing special. That said, much like you guys, I have a preference. It's different than your preference. I can go either way on it.
Gotcha. And that's what our commissioner said too, you know? Is this a showstopper? Absolutely not. Absolutely not, but if you don't ask,
Yep.
you don't know, so
Yeah,
that's what we're here for.
I'd feel safer right now with Mr. Glavy and what Chase said for the first step to get it going. Leave it there. Then we can come back.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even had council give it a good look at it as far as what's the requirements are, right? Tom, I know we discussed it, but you haven't dug into this issue.
You mean as far as eliminating the vote at town meeting?
Right, or correspondingly, legal requirements from the state in terms of setting the costs and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think the costs are a separate issue. I think whether you have the town meeting component or not, you do need to be cognizant of the fact that whenever you add more users, you're gonna be going back to kind of recalculate betterments already issued. And so I think that's a fairly complicated calculation, so you do need to be cognizant of that. As far as the open meeting law piece, I can dig in and see what other towns are operating this way, and
No, I mean, my concern was on the first matter, not on the open meeting law issue.
Is it fair to say that if we did give the water department, the commissioners control, that if they, say Russell Street, I don't know how many homes are on Russell Street, say there's 50 homes on Russell Street, and 40 of them opted in. Would that, those numbers would have to be calculated based upon what that particular betterment would cost at that point in time? I'm trying to
Yeah, and then
understand both
everybody
sides of it,
else,
frankly.
as the system gets bigger, everyone else is entitled to a break.
so the system is constructed based on the betterments issued
Correct.
on the first flush.
So there'd be, in theory, there'd be an abatement, to use your word, assigned to anybody that paid into the first bite, when, you know,
Right.
we initially.
Yeah, flush isn't a good word, but, right.
Maybe it's an excellent word.
First flush, you said?
The short answer and the unsatisfying answer is it's complicated, right? Because any expansion would be taking advantage of the capital expenditures that have already occurred and would have to bear some responsibility for those capital expenditures. Potentially, and how that would offset the capital expenditures that others have put forward and how that sunsets, right? You know, someone coming online 30 years from now,
It's depreciation, yeah.
right, you know, the system's already been paid for. They're taking advantage of a very different system than the one that was built. So those implications will have to sunset. In other words, they have a lot of work to do to figure out exactly how that gets reflected financially.
And again, this is not the first sewer district in the Commonwealth, so I'm sure there's.
No, but it wasn't the
Stuff we can go
first,
back
it's the
to.
first one we've built.
Agreed.
But our consultants, they may be in the rearview mirror, but they have been involved in this, building sewer systems and designing them in multiple places. And they're the folks who were insistent that the whole point of having a limited district is for predictability, reliability in the financial structure, and that you grow it incrementally because you have to make adjustments every time you do that. I just wouldn't feel comfortable unless we went back and revisited with somebody who actually works in that world, before opting for a change for it. If they come back and say, no, it's relatively easy, then I'd say fine, but I haven't heard that yet.
We got one shot at it right now, that's all I need, you know.
Shots in all the time.
Right.
So I guess my question is, why would that expansion require, why is it important for it to be a vote of town meeting? Bob? Can we still arrive at the same analysis and conclusion without bringing it before town meeting?
I think there's two issues there, and I wasn't focusing so much on the town meeting for the sake of having town meeting vote on it, although,
Because that's
yeah,
the way
a lot
it's
of, a lot of angst has been experienced by people who are just outside the district and that sort of thing, so there are folks that, were accepting that we had a limited scope, but I think the more important thing is that it not be changed on an ongoing basis, that it be done only periodically because of the difficulty associated with adjusting the whole financial structure.
Right. So, and I understand that component to it, but why did we need to go to town meeting to ensure that takes place?
As I say, it's two different issues. That one, I mean, they're proposing two changes here. One, we had already intended for it to come back, any changes to come back to town meeting.
Okay,
And two is the notion that, okay, say you got rid of that, well, you still would only want to deal with any changes in large chunks, otherwise you're gonna be inviting chaos on the finances.
right.
I would add a third piece to that, and that's town meeting's role in that case, and this goes to my confidence piece, is to ensure the equitability of it, right?
Okay.
That if this is done well, it's a perfunctory thing, and town meeting says, well, why wouldn't you expand, if you have capacity in the system and you've structured the payments the right way, town meeting would say, okay, carry on. But town meeting's role there is to make sure that financial structure
That
is
they're
equitable.
comfortable with that expansion?
Exactly.
But there are, and I'm not gonna get into a big debate, and, because I understand where you guys are coming from, but, town meeting is twice a year. You know what I mean? So, if there's opportunity for growth of some sort on any type, whether it be housing, whether it be commercial or anything, no, don't do it until, you wanna start your project in July, no, we gotta wait until October, November, till we get going. Yeah, you wanna start now, you gotta wait until May, until you start going. That's another concern that we had, and there's an opportunity loss when it comes to that, so. But again, commissioners are supporting this article.
Any comments from the FinCom?
The only question would be, for projects like that where there would be an opportunity, I mean, do those just come up out of the blue, or there's usually a lot of planning involved with that before they come in, right?
There are. There are.
Mr. Sanders?
Mr. Chairman, George Sanders, 672 Great North. I understand what the to-be sewer commissioner is wanting to do. Normally, the town of Littleton doesn't have the problem that normally cities have. And under the Clean Water Act means that a lot of the cities out there, they have the storm water that's coming off the streets and roadway is in with the sewer. So EPA requires them to separate and put the sewer on a line by itself. Here in the town here, you don't have that problem where you have water and sewer. So the line that you're going to put in now is going to be the sewer line. And normally, when you have community block grants in cities, what they normally do, an area that's been targeted, they will go in and they will put in a separate sewer line in there and clean up that area and bring up the standards to EPA. So what I see here is that you don't have the capital money there for improvement for the program yet. So I would think that you would have to wait till you get the capital money there, that you can go ahead and put those extra lines in the streets that you have out here. But who's gonna pay for it if you just arbitrarily go and do it now at the beginning? I think you have to wait and generate that money for the capital improvement, because you can do one or two things with the money. Do capital improvement or reduce the user's rate, because you cannot have excess funding in the process of this enterprise. So it has to be committed. And if you're gonna commit it, putting in new lines, then that will be coming from the capital that you build up in there. I think you have to wait and get money there before you go ahead. If they're digging up the road out there, yeah, you would like to go ahead and put the line in. But my question is this, who will pay for it? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may just respond real quick to George.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Real quick, George, the rate pay, I mean, the users would pay, but, I guess my question to you are, you know the language change, are you for the town meeting or against, removing the? I hear what you're saying about the capital, and you're right on the mark. But the question is, do we keep town meeting for the home rule petition?
I know what you say you would like to do.
Yep.
Okay? But I think until you get up and you're running, I think that it would be more beneficial for the sewer commissions to wait before they ask for it to be stricken from the record and give you that latitude to do, because now the people have voted and said, yes, we're gonna do the sewer system, and, you know, you're up and
Gotcha.
running. I just think that it wouldn't be to your advantage to take that out of there now.
Okay.
I think I truly think that you can wait a little bit.
I appreciate that, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure, Mr. Carter. Okay, we're gonna move on so we can,
Yep.
so do we need to vote on that? I just
If there's no change being proposed, no vote is necessary.
move on to Article, is there more than 9?
Yep. 11?
No, is there anything more on?
No, it looks like we're sticking with what's proposed, and that's fine.
Hey, if we can get this thing figured out as quick as next fall, I mean, before anything even gets built, you probably have an opportunity to change it,
Okay.
so.
I'm good. Can I
We
ask?
need a comfort level that we know what we're
Sure.
doing.
So you want to take a lead on the 11 too?
Sure. Did you get the slides?
I did, and for some reason my folders are not fairly certain I saved it. I may just have to pop into my email. Give me 1 second. Feel free
So
to.
just to kind of briefly, Cindy was at our meeting last night, talked about the home rule petition. We also talked about Article 11 in regards to the land acquisition for the smart sewer. Again, the commission has had great discussion. Cindy, we all talked about the article and the way it's written and the presentation for the article at town meeting. You were gonna take it? Are you taking it for town meeting? I
Well,
mean-
it's been assigned to Paul and Chase, I believe, Article
Okay.
11, right? So we didn't discuss it any further
Okay, so
after our initial meeting.
we were asked to do a couple real basic slides to try and get the article approved. So David, myself, Nick sat down and we came up with the next couple of slides. You'll see very basic slides in regards to what it's for, what it's about, and where we're going, if the article passes on Monday.
Apologies for the technological
No, no
delays here.
problem.
Is this the pictures of the aerial photography and the
Nope.
map? No?
No, that's.
Article 12.
That's Article 12.
Oh, okay.
That's Article 12.
Well, no, there were pictures for Article 11 too. I mean, there were pictures of the property.
We stripped it down just to basics of the article, took out specifics.
Yeah, you were looking at the 10-11 presentation.
Right.
Yeah, so this was.
Well, no,
more-
I'm just talking about the pictures we shared last week, the ones that Al Fletcher provided as far as aerial photography and the picture of the plan.
Yeah, we didn't do,
We didn't put those in, no.
Well, we've got them if you think they could be,
Is there any detriment to getting that specific with
well,
the property owner and the?
we still need to
address?
go through a procurement process. So, you know, we have to go out to bid essentially for property. And, you know, we need to get this passed and go out to bid. So, did anybody present the number?
There was a number that is contained in the special town meeting report updates, and that was 1.6 million plus another $50,000 for costs associated with, acquisition and various other factors, which you guys could probably go into more detail on. 50,000, so the article reads, or the motion of the article reads 1.6 million, and then for a total of 1.65 million.
Okay.
I think it was, I guess I thought it was 165 plus 5.
I think it's 1.6 plus
Okay.
plus 5.
Yeah, and I maybe, yeah,
1.6, right, plus 5.
I'm probably missing a zero then.
This is for
Zero
Article
between
11?
points.
Yes. So, again, real simple, 2-slide presentation. Here's your article. You can go to the next one, Nina. What's it about? We're gonna authorize the acquisition of property. It'll give us the ability, because right now, if Article 9 goes through and is passed, that kind of passes the torch, so to speak. It'll give
The
us.
buck, right, George?
Oh, the buck, there you go. Passes the buck. The ability to negotiate prospective locations, you know. And during this process, of course, we'll have, once we get into some type of negotiation, we'll ensure that the public is aware of what's actually happening. And then land appraisals have to happen, and then negotiations and the actual acquisition has to happen. That's, go ahead.
None of that requires a town meeting vote. I think when Article 11 was written, it was presumed that it would be preceded by Article 10, which is the funding article. So without that, and, I mean, this is even saying less than, we were talking about last week.
Well, the Article 11 is to ask for money to buy property. Period. That's
But it
what
should
it's
be getting funded out of the borrowing article.
There was always 2 articles.
Yeah, I know.
2 articles, 10 was
First
for
one would authorize the amount of money, and then the second one
For the-
starts the spend part of
for
it.
the construction.
It's for the entirety of the project. There's a land acquisition line
So
item
what does
in
the article actually read then?
Article 11.
Yeah.
Article 11, as far as I mean, I can pull it open and we can discuss it, but it did include a placeholder for funding, and it did mention borrowing. So technically, Article 11 could incorporate the borrowing aspect if needed for property acquisition.
And the way that we'll present Article 11 now is the exact same way that we presented the $2.2 million design article, which is that this is money that, when fully constructed, is borne by the users.
Oh, absolutely.
But right now, it's exactly like the design funding.
But it was always gonna have to be, or at least in the past few weeks of discussion, because the identified property owner, kind of, some of those things are still outstanding with the appraisals. It was always gonna be subject to appraisals and subject to the 30B process. But the whole point of having this article on there was identifying the property so that we could get the people comfortable with, what you guys had negotiated. And then, the funding piece would have been a reality had Article 10 gone through. If it hasn't, well, then we probably ought to come back for that piece of it, but.
Again, that's
Are
my
you
interpret,
gonna be talking about the Fletcher property in question, or?
well, nothing, there's nothing finalized. There's nothing
Well, I know,
finalized
but
yet.
we're prepared
I mean,
to
we
say
still
that-
gotta go through a procurement process, Paul. So
Okay.
whether it's,
All right.
whether it's there or some other locations that have been looked at.
But we
I
talked
don't know.
about this, the whole, it's.
I agree, but now,
Predicated on, obviously, it's predicated on an agreement which will be driven by the appraisals, but the appraisals, there's no mystery there. It's gonna be somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. And that's why $1 million's in the budget pro forma for the project. It hopefully won't be that high. But, I don't think Mr. Fletcher had any problem with this being talked about publicly.
Can I just say
yes, you
something?
can. Yes, sir.
I think we're presenting a lot of detail here that could jeopardize our negotiations going forward. I'm very hesitant to start.
Have them set it in, that isn't public information.
Yeah. I think we're going down a
I think
road
the
here.
value of this
I
is
think
the-
the importance of getting funding
Or the
to
authorization for
negotiate authorization
Okay.
is because we need to have the location to start the design process. To finalize the design, we need to know where's the plant going, right? So this allows us to, with this authorization, to go through that procurement process, have the location, and finalize the design. Otherwise,
Would
we
it,
don't have a final design.
would it be palatable to the water commissioners there's a needle to thread here, to present the Fletcher property as one potential bidder in this RFP, or not, one potential respondent in this RFP, without necessarily saying, this is where it's going to be, because my fear is that people will see this as purely hypothetical, when in fact it's not intended to be. We simply have to adhere to the state process. And listen, I mean, if someone better comes in through the RFP process than that property, great.
So I'll defer to.
But I'd
Ivan.
like
Ivan's
to
been
be able to
dealing
put
with the
something
landowner,
concrete.
So I'm gonna just defer to you, Ivan, you've been up close and personal.
Yeah, I think we're jumping the gun here to say that he's on board
Okay.
at this point, that it's going to happen, because 11th hour things happen.
Sure.
And
I don't disagree with that, but this article, with absent a specific property, suggests like, we got a good one in mind, but, well, if that doesn't fall through, just give us, we'll go out and buy something.
No. I mean, we have a good one in mind, but we can't control. We have an RFP process,
Right?
right?
So it
we
should
have-
be before the town after that.
After the RFP process, so, okay.
What
We're
should
just
be
delaying
before the
everything,
town
that's
after the
all.
RFP?
Purchase.
Well, I mean,
That delays design.
The purchase would have to be also contingent upon approval at town meeting for the whole sewer system,
right. So,
not to mention.
so Paul, we could issue an RFP. We can identify a property. We can enter into negotiations with the potential, with
Yeah.
the seller.
Yeah.
We can put contingencies in the P&S agreement that it's contingent upon the project
Well, the
passing in the
contingencies
fall.
don't need to be in the P&S agreement, they need to be in this language. Otherwise, this language says we're funding purchase of a property.
Let me finish.
Yeah, okay.
And then, when we bring the project forward, presumably in May, it will be a cohesive project. It will say, this is the parcel we've identified, this is the parcel we intend to purchase because town meeting approved the purchase in October. This is the design that we're proposing, and we can go forward systematically that way. We don't need to, I think the way this, we have to go through the RFP process.
Yeah.
We can't
But
bring.
you don't need this article to do that.
No, I understand that, but I think it's a mistake to identify the specific process for all the reasons that have been already stated. What if we identify this parcel and through the RFP process, we find a better parcel? Or what if the negotiations fall through? If everyone's gonna come back and say, hey, in town meeting, you told us it was going here. It's not going there now, what happened?
Well, that's what we're
So-
setting ourselves up with this as
I don't-
written.
No, I don't
don't
see
see
it
it.
that way at all.
Well, what property, how does this restrict the property that we come back with?
What do you mean, how does it restrict it?
This is authorizing money, but it doesn't.
So if
restrict-
we start this process without the authorization of funding, and we go through this 120, 160-day process to try and locate property, and we have zero authorization for money, zero, and then this property owner says, well, you know what, now I gotta wait for May? You know?
But that's how we always buy property. It starts with the,
No.
yes, it starts with negotiation, and then you go and ask for the money.
So,
You don't get the money for the land first.
all right, so if we don't need town meeting approval on this to go to
Do these steps.
RFP, to go to RFP.
Look, the value here in my mind was identifying the property so people could buy into that we actually did what we said we were gonna do and went out and found a better property, and that the people who are concerned about the light and water property no longer had to worry about it.
Right, so Paul, we've identified a better
Right.
property, but we don't have an agreement.
Right.
We haven't negotiated
I know
on
that.
that. So it's, to me, a little risky putting it out there saying, this is the property.
Well, I don't think there's any harm in identifying it, that that's what we want it to go. If the only contingent, right now, it's predicated on, two sets of appraisals, which are both being sought, right? I mean,
A month, 2 months ago, when these articles were placed, right? 2 months, 3 months ago, whenever it was placed, this was not part of the discussion.
No, we were hoping to have this deal negotiated, done by now. That was the reasoning.
The article was placed to be able to authorize the town get property for the smart sewer,
A specific property.
okay?
I mean, that would,
Listen, and here's the thing. The ultimate acquisition of this property is going to be contingent upon an affirmative vote in the spring, right? But what this does is this gives us the ability to go forward and get that fully buttoned up. We know what our spending threshold is, we know what our cap is, and I think there's no harm in going forward now and getting the authorization from town meeting to do that. And furthermore, it allows us to really accentuate to town meeting, listen, we listened to you. You didn't want it at the
well,
DPW
right, I'm with you on
facility.
all that. That was the
Here we
point, but
are.
the whole point is to identify the property. Otherwise, it's like, you know.
I would really like
it's
to
still out
find
there
a way
hunting.
to identify the property in question as an expected respondent to an RFP.
Fine. I mean, I don't think council had a legal problem with us doing that as long as we followed up with the RFP process, right?
You need to do the RFP process.
Right.
But we can have identified a location that we
I mean, you
we
can
found would be
you,
satisfactory.
if you would like to, you can identify a property that you think would be ideal.
Well, I
state
wouldn't
that
even
we-
say ideal. I think we've identified a property that could work, that would respond to the RFP. And there may be other better ones out there. There are not 100 of them. We've turned over a lot of rocks, but
So Paul,
Those rocks were turned prior to us getting authorization, hopefully on Monday, by the way.
you wanted the
Just to make
property
that clear.
identified on this article?
No, I don't think that needs to. I think the presentation needs to contain that so people know what it is there.
We were asked to do a couple slides, I did a couple slides. If you guys, I mean, this was an
But
article
look,
that.
I sat down with Nick and with your guy Jason,
Yep.
and we talked about this openly, and in fact, they gave me the aerial photo and the plan, so I could bring it and present it to this board last week, you know, which I did.
But a lot of that was when 10 was still in play, Article
When
10.
what?
Article 10 and
Well,
11 was going together.
I'll acknowledge, that's
Yeah.
a difference, you know, that's got pulled back, so, you know, that would have covered the financing for this, and then procedurally, town meeting would have said, okay, we've already got the financing piece in place, here's the property we like, we do have to go through a 30B, so if the 30B yields up this property, we're gonna buy it, you're gonna give us the authorization. If it doesn't, we're gonna have to come back to you with another property.
But if you
So I think the
don't,
bones of it are still there, but
What you just said is what we're asking.
except that, I mean,
You know?
if we go up there and say, there's a property, but we're not telling you what it is, and I mean, that's just, you know.
So, as the primary negotiator, or the person who's really brought this property and this owner to the table, what do you think that person would be most comfortable with? I mean, you know him better than anyone in the room, and we're grateful that you've been able to have this conversation and bring him to the table. So, what is your opinion here? Is it something that you think he'd be uncomfortable having his property identified as the most likely candidate, or? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I think that sends a message.
Yeah, we wanna buy it.
To the
Well, I think it sends a message, and,
to the buyer,
yeah.
the price just went up.
It's, You
Let's call a
can
spade a
say that
spade,
all
right?
you want, except we have to live by the appraisals anyway, so it's nice to rub your hands and say, oh boy, my price just went up, except it won't. The appraisal is what it is. And we're not authorized to spend beyond that, or we shouldn't be inviting that. I don't know, we met with him as a group, and I know he wants to get his appraisal in hand before he decides on a price tag. Meanwhile, we're doing the same thing, right? You guys have engaged Avery Associates? Right, John Avery?
Not sure about that either.
Right, we've reached out, we don't have him engaged yet.
Oh, all right. Well, I just,
So there's two alternatives.
yeah.
We move forward with it, well, it's three alternatives. We move forward with it and we identify it, we put a picture up there of the aerial view of the property and say, this is hopefully where we're gonna end up. We move forward with it without identifying it and kind of winking a nod and trust us,
Right.
or we pull it.
I think the first one's the best option, but I just wish you guys would go back and think about that again. To me, this is a change, because conversations we had were along those lines, and I wish Nick were here, because that's primarily who I had been talking to. But we met with the group. I mean, I know, Ivan, you've been dealing with Alan principally, but I don't know how recently you've talked to him or not. I mean, is he?
Today.
Today? Where is he at with his appraisal? Any idea?
He has his appraisal.
He does have his appraisal, all right.
I guess at this point, I don't see the harm in saying more clearly, we would like to purchase this property. I don't know how that, I'm having a hard time seeing how that changes his stance in a significant financial way. I mean, because we've already made it clear, we think this is a good choice. This is a technologically viable choice. It's land that works, and we think it works for him too.
We're gonna
Well,
have appraisals.
we don't have appraisals and we don't have approval from the town.
So
It's
Chase,
pending those things.
you just said something, we think it
Right.
works for him too. He's the ultimate decision maker on whether it works for
course.
him, okay?
Sure.
And I don't wanna jump the gun that this is gonna be fait accompli for him,
Understood.
you know?
I do think that in any negotiation for purchase of land, I can't help but chime in here. I do think I understand the need for public discussion, and I understand the board's position on, or at least the board members who are in favor of disclosing. But I do, if this was any other project and I was working on the project actively with you all, I would be recommending that we not discuss or disclose any details of the acquisition, because I do think it affects the negotiating position of the body.
I mean, I don't see why we couldn't just say a parcel, not the parcel we've been looking at, we located another parcel, another part of town, we could even say off Route 2A, and just leave it at that. I don't think we should put up a map of the parcel, I don't think we should use prospective sellers' names. I just think that we can still identify it and be transparent enough with the town. But we do have an RFP process to go through. And I think the way the presentation is written is fine, and I think, more so, we need to identify the steps to the residents so that they understand the process with Article 11. But I just think we're making a huge mistake if we throw up a picture of a parcel, identify, who the property owner is. That's just not the way we've operated with other transactions, and I do think we lose some negotiating power with that, because we don't know, it might end up being somewhere else. But I think people will be satisfied it's no longer where we were looking at, and those concerns are alleviated. And plus, the bottom line is, at the end of the day, they will have a say on whether or not this parcel is a good parcel, and we can go ahead and purchase it. I mean, they are gonna have the say in that once we identify it, but we need to go through the negotiation process with this, and the RFP process.
And that's a really important message to the town too. That's how the town know, the RFP process is what keeps us honest in this
Right.
as well.
Right. So,
FinCon, any comments?
You haven't said anything about money yet, so and I don't know if you can, because,
What do we
you
have?
know what?
We already have 1.65.
1.65 what?
Up to.
So you're gonna put
That is
that,
for the land?
that will go into the
I
article.
haven't heard that.
So we're,
We started some conversations.
This says 1.6.
Tonight it did. That came through this afternoon,
Well, we started this conversation with that.
That's
Tom
what I
dials one
got
number and
from
then
Nick
Chase corrected
and
it.
Jim and I.
Okay.
Mr. Moore?
If you're not going to identify the parcel, but you're gonna say it's, say, on Route 2, if I were in the audience, I'd wanna know how far from the nearest residence it was. So if you could provide that kind of information to alleviate some concern from people on Route 2, that it might be close to their property.
Mr. Sanders?
It's a good input, Steve.
Mr. Chairman, George Sanders, 672 Great Road. I think that the town need to be cautioned as to what they're doing here. Because if you identify a piece of property, then I don't find that the town is being fair and impartial to others that may have property. Because you have identified and said, this is the one that we want here. I believe, as it stands right now, with Article 10 in a whole pattern, I believe Article 11 has to go forward and asking for the authorization to purchase the land for the smart sewer system. And I'll tell you why. Because if you're going to send out a request asking for property, I believe under procurement procedures, you can put a dollar value that you don't want to exceed in terms of purchasing this property. And you let all of the requests come back to you, and they will identify how much money they want. And at that time, you can decide which ones that you want to look at. But the process will be fair, that you don't identify anybody or property, because you don't know what you may get back. You may get back a real sweet deal that's better than some of the others. But then you have to make the determination, will this property serve the smart sewer system, to include if we wish to extend the smart sewer system. You got to keep that into focus if you're going to buy a piece of property. And it's important right now that you go forth to the town. You got the 2.2, as Chase said, that you had for the blueprint. Now you're going to go and ask, what's the amount that you want to do here, 1.6?
Yes.
Is that the amount, 1.6?
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed 1.6. So I think that you got a better chance of the town people giving you a 1.6 than what you had previous before you put a hold on 10. I understand that the money was to come out of 10, but you can also back that out. The 2.2 is being backed out, you can back out the 1.6. And that would be the net of what money that you're gonna need to do the system. But I think right now, the water department, or the sewer department, they need to continue doing what they're doing, put out the RFP, and see what it brings them back, and not disclose anybody. And when you do come back and tell us, and you make the decision, this is one that we got that came back, then you tell the public as to what it is, and where it's at, how much it costs, and let them ask any questions they want at that time. That's what I think you ought to do in regards to the procurement aspect. So I think the town is putting themselves in an awkward situation by naming property. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mark Rabacher, Hartwell Avenue. I'm a little confused by this whole thing now, because if this whole process goes through, you're asking for 1.6 to go through the RFP process. Are you coming and saying you're going to come back in May to get approval for the actual purchase then? Because if you are, then why don't you just ask for it in May? Because this is going to, I don't believe you'll get the votes when you just say, we want this money to go out and buy the property. If you're not identifying the property, I don't see how the taxpayers are gonna support it. It's just too open-ended. It's never the way we bought property in the past. We've always said, we want X amount of money to buy property Y. And that's the way it's been done. We're not asking for money to buy some random property that meets something. The process has already been, the RFP process has already been completed before you ask for the money, not after.
So what direction are we gonna go?
I mean, just one thing, one comment in regards to property, 61A property is pretty much all we bought, right? When was the last time we bought any other type of property?
Robinson Road.
Robinson Road. Done through,
That was unique.
yeah, I mean, that's more historical, yeah.
Put a start with deed on it, right?
I understand the point that we're asking the town to authorize us to go forward for a piece, a currently unspecified piece of land. I think it's still worth bringing this forward at this town meeting. And the reason for that is that it puts us in the driver's seat so that we can ultimately get through the RFP process, know exactly what it is we're going to design around, and complete those design aspects. If we don't have authorization, to fund the RFP, then we go to next fall town meeting with uncertainty about the location, which then drives uncertainty in the design. And that ultimately costs more money in the long run because it could drive significant design revisions. And I think that is less palatable to the community than a little bit of uncertainty here, as long as we're unambiguously clear that the town will not buy this property unless the full sewer funding article goes through next spring, right? That's when this whole package comes together. And the town before the town actually acquires something, we know exactly which piece of land it will be. It's a little bit of a Rube Goldberg machine. I think this is the best course forward, though, is to still bring this forward. If we do bring it forward, I think we need to talk a little bit more about how to respond to questions from the public. I still would really like to be able to talk about hypothetical properties. But
It's your article.
I understand that, but I also don't
We'll
want
be there with you.
I don't want to cross you guys up either.
Yep.
So I think we need to be able to figure
We'll
out
be
how to
there-
respond
we'll
to
be there
those
with you.
questions. Because we will invariably get a question from the public
Sure.
about specific properties. So,
I think we need to move forward with Article 11. We need to keep the project moving forward.
Do you need any language change or just go forward with the, how it's written?
And again, this presentation, by all means, change it, trash it. We just threw something real quick together for what we thought were the high points of the article.
So this would need to be amended with the dollar value in there.
it does need to be
It
amended.
becomes a borrowing article versus if we were to just do an RFP and identify a property, and then we could have that RFP back in, say, January, and we would identify the property, we could go forward with design. It wouldn't have been, we wouldn't have allocated the funds for it, it would be contingent upon, our RFP would be contingent upon town meeting vote in May.
Well, the way that this motion is currently worded in the packet wouldn't necessarily, I mean, unless there was a contingency in the RFP, as you just said a moment ago, technically this provides all authorization to move forward. And that could be modified, but just
Okay.
telling you what's currently written.
I'm just trying to paint the entire picture, so.
Sure, yeah,
For my own edification, but
Okay.
also for others that may in fact be asking some of the same questions.
yeah, yep.
We're gonna be including a dollar amount, are we gonna be supporting that with any kind of justification, of where that number come from?
Out of the properties, that was the most expensive property that we looked at. And so that was feasible for the placement of facility.
So that's a sales, so that's an actual sales price for
Yes.
a property?
Yes.
Okay.
The appraisal will,
Well, the RFP process, it's gonna have to be done first, then the appraisal process will come through, and then the negotiations will.
We were looking for
you can
properties
put
that
the
were
appraisal before the RFP.
about 2 acres in size to support our needs and growth. And that's about,
Well, we have to go
that's
through.
about $500,000. I don't know how the hell we get to.
Well, that's an
$1.6
assumption
million.
that somebody's gonna sell us just that amount of land. Somebody may say, if you really, want this, you gotta buy this.
Exactly.
I mean, that's, right?
Well, you put out an RFP, you're gonna get a lot of responses.
Absolutely. That's the process though, Paul, So we didn't wanna, based on what we know, we didn't wanna, if there's viable property out there, do you wanna say no to the 1.6? And what if, the other properties say, nah, I'm not interested anymore, going through this process, I don't wanna deal with this process. So that's where the 165.
I can't think of any of the properties we talked about that was anywhere close to that. Is there a new one that popped up?
Nope.
Okay, well, that's a hell of a swallow. All right.
This has to come back to us, like. It has to come back to us anyway, so. Just vote to leave it?
The way it's worded in the
Yeah, it comes
article,
back to
this
us.
is to the board, authorizes the Board of Selectmen to select pursuant, to the procurement laws. If I said article, I meant motion.
Do we need to vote on that?
I'm sorry. Well, I think there are two things we need to decide. The first is who will be working on finalizing the presentation and finalizing the different elements to that. And two, if the board is comfortable with Article 11, which we can vote on in the process of voting our other articles, the motion for Article 11.
Well, from our board, I think Chase has been, if you're gonna be there on Monday, our lead spokesperson on this, so should probably be working with the Light and Water Commissioners on that.
So you'll be in contact with him?
Yeah, and I think what I'd like to do is, let's augment this with maybe the map of the properties we have looked at, just to give folks a sense of the scale of the possibilities, right? I'm fearful of not giving them anything concrete, so. But I think we can work on that offline. I'm sensing you're not on board with me, but
No.
we'll find a way to.
Yeah.
Well, we need to, right, so the deadline to submit visuals was today at 4. I requested a placeholder for this article, so we need to get this finalized and submitted, because it's not fair
That's to Tim.
to the employees that are working on preparing for town meeting. We need to wrap this up, is my point.
So Chase, I can have, maybe Dave and Nick reach out and.
Yeah, let's plan a quick call tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'll find a way to get it done. Okay.
So, we all set?
For this, yeah, and we can come back to it when we do the motion. I mean, is there any further discussion on the motion language that exists here, or have we hashed it out to the point where we're prepared to vote it when we're discussing the entire supplemental report? I'm sensing we've discussed it enough and we're ready to vote on it.
That's all we have. Okay. That's enough, right? Do you have anything else? 12? No? No, we don't. Well, 12? Oh, we have 12.
I don't think we have to say anything about it tonight, unless you guys have any
Unless you
questions.
have questions.
I don't envy whoever's gonna have to present on PFAS.
Yeah, it is what it is, right? We have to deal with it.
Yeah, no, I thought I went through the technical stuff and really
Yeah.
liked what you guys put together.
We had a, just as an update, we had a fantastic meeting with DEP on Tuesday, in regard to the PFAS issue that we're facing. So a lot of positive feedback from DEP about what we're doing and how we're handling the situation. And hopefully, the administration is doing some supplemental funding in regards to this issue, because it's just not a Littleton issue. It's a Commonwealth issue, and it's actually a national issue.
Worldwide.
Worldwide.
And just so you guys know, they're not very good at tooting their own horn here. There are, almost every community in the state is gonna have some issue with this, and very few of them are willing to address it right now. There's a lot of put your head in the sand, hope it goes away, or hope the state finds a way to fund this so we can not get killed on costs. And there are only a few communities that are really charging ahead and tackling it head on, Littleton among them. And it's a growing concern across the Commonwealth and across the country.
Sure is. So hopefully with the positive feedback we're getting from DEP, you never know, there may be some help, you know. Can't guarantee anything, but we'll have a nice presentation for Monday for Article 12. And, move forward.
Just like Chase, I want to commend you on that, because I've seen other communities not make the presentation you did and alarm people to the extent that they thought the world was ending, when this can be taken care of. It might cost money, but it can be taken care of.
That's our goal. That's our goal. We'll take care of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you Monday.
Are you guys gonna vote on that article
I was just gonna have them package it all up at the same time.
at the end?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good call.
So at this point, Mr. Chairman, I guess I would suggest we put our attention to the special town meeting report updates. It's on page 28 of 43 in the packet, if anyone's looking at it digitally.
Say that again, Nina?
28 of 43.
Thank you.
So Article 7, if I may, Mr. Chairman?
If you can tell me where it is in the,
Yes, after the town meeting report. Right here.
all right.
Article 7, I think, is pretty straightforward. I assume no discussion will be needed. The Conservation Commission did vote their support for Article 7. The difference here from what is in the actual warrant is the fact that the warrant included the words "or any other sum," which we can't vote on. We're proposing to take those words out by revising almost exactly the same language that's in the warrant article by simply removing the words "or any other sum," so that the motion can actually be implemented. In other words, it said 18,500 or any other sum, and the "or any other sum" was erroneous. So it's just a modification to the motion for that item. Article 9, which we discussed earlier, at the last board meeting, one of the conversations and one of the discussion points that we had was to show the changes from the home rule petition that was voted on at the May 6, 2019 annual town meeting. And based on town council's assistance and my looking at it, we agreed to put it at the end as an attachment, so it wasn't difficult to see because it's so many pages, really. But it will all be contained in the same stapled envelope, same stapled pile. So there's a notation here that says marked up version of the home rule petition from the May 6, 2019 annual town meeting is contained at the end of the report, of this report in an attachment. Please see underline and strike through. I specifically put those words in because the paperwork will not be in color, so you'll have to distinguish the underline and strike through. The Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, if either or both boards are prepared, and I'm not sure if the Finance Committee would actually vote on this article, since it's not financial, that's up to the Finance Committee, would be asked to vote whether you're in support of this article to move it forward so that that information could also be placed here. Other than that, everything else that we've discussed is, I think, straightforward to what you've seen before, so I don't know as though further discussion on Article 9 is necessary unless either the board or the finance committee want to stop me and jump in with questions.
All set in 9?
So then Article 11, first line after the title of the article, same thing, the Board of Selectmen and/or the Finance Committee, if ready tonight, would be asked to make a motion to either support or not support that article, and so that that information can be incorporated. Again, I think we've discussed that item at enough depth tonight from my sense of the board. I'll just pause right there in case there's further discussion.
Nope.
Article 12. There has been, I mean, the motion is technically new information since it was not contained in the town meeting report, but in part, could you speak on, Tom, how, if any, differences there are between the article and the motion itself?
We're talking Article 11?
12.
PFAS.
Oh, I'm sorry, the differences in the motion?
Yeah, the article versus the motion, any material differences or changes there? I mean, it's just longer language, but
No,
I don't see
it's
any.
really just fleshing it out. It's still the same process. In
That's what they.
the first paragraph, they're looking to borrow money to deal specifically with facilities and infrastructure to reduce the concentrations of PFAS. The second part of the article is part of the litigation that's going on right now with, between the water department and some town residents, where town residents claim a certain part of, a certain parcel of land has Article 97 protection. It's the town's position that it does not have Article 97 protection. However, what we're doing here is trying to cut to the chase in the litigation, and if the plaintiffs are right and it does have Article 97 protection, we're seeking to remove that protection and replace it with a different piece of land. So that, why waste money on litigation if we'll just get another piece and protect that article, that land with Article 97.
Is there a red line on that somewhere, the packet that we had, and maybe I'm missing it in it, didn't see any red line in the town meeting updates? Is the whole,
Maybe I'm missing your question, but.
so if you go to page 33, right, which is the 33 of the packet, which is part of the special town meeting report updates. I don't see anything that's either underlined or struck through,
So this is, the difference here is the article in the town meeting report and the warrant, which are identical in terms of the articles themselves,
Sure.
remains. This is just the motion because it wasn't presented in the,
Got it.
it said to be presented at town meeting.
Thanks for not throwing things in.
No worries. So, assuming no further discussion on Article 12,
Presuming someone else will be dense like me, could we add a quick italicized note at the beginning of this, explaining what's actually new or different in this, that this is,
we can do that. I would suggest doing that for all of them. And it depends on the expectations or culture of Littleton and what they understand to be the town meeting report updates. I've strictly tried to only put updates in here and not rehash existing information in the warrant. So you technically need both documents.
and
to
maybe
follow along.
that's my disconnect, is I don't have the hard copy of the actual warrant.
Have mine.
Think about it, Nina, if you think it makes sense, I would be happy to see it. If you think it's an unnecessary adjustment, then carry on and ignore me.
I guess it really depends on how it gets presented and whether people are comfortable with what the updates report does and that it's only supplemental to the report itself. That's something you all would know much more than I would.
So Chase, I think I can also address one issue. So in the warrant article of 12, we identified one parcel.
Okay.
And in the motion, we identified two parcels as replacement.
Okay.
Okay, so there is actually somewhat of a
So
difference
there
that
is
you may
something
want to
new
call
and
out.
different there. Okay.
Well, that might be the other way around.
No, I think that's helpful because it will,
I think it is the other way around.
Yeah, it is.
two down to one. In any case, that will help justify the language in there.
Sure, we can add a sentence that says,
Well, just to adjust, in the red line version, just show that.
there is
but
no red line in
motion.
this case.
We can do a quick couple of sentences
Okay.
explaining that.
Yeah. This is going to Neshoba Tech at noon tomorrow, no later than FYI.
We're meeting at 8:30, right?
That's right.
Yeah, we can do that.
I love that you're using the tech though.
Lots of time.
It was a suggestion someone made. I thought it was your suggestion.
Wait a minute. Take credit.
Motion to make it a town.
I don't care who did it, they just like they're using them. True.
Unless there's further discussion on 12.
Thank you for indulging me.
Sure, no problem, thank you. Article 13, the library building project construction, same thing here. The Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee have prepared a vote to support or not to support this article. And then also, Mr. Chair, I would ask that we ask the PMBC Chair, Steve Moore, to discuss whether this number is correct or if there is a modification to this number. The number I have in the report currently is 13.078288. That was probably not the best way to present it. $13,078,288. And that was the amount that was supplied by Vertex's estimate, less $1.5 million.
So the original estimate that we got from Vertex was based on a less than 30% complete set of drawings. And that's the one that came in at, I think, $300,000, something like that. On Tuesday, we sent out a revised, or an updated project cost report, and that was based on a 70% complete set of drawings, which included the mechanicals, the electrical, the plumbing, the fire protection. So it was a much more detailed, there were 80-some-odd drawings as opposed to less than a dozen on the previous estimate. So we had a much more detailed set of drawings to go off of, and that number came in at 14,570 something. $14,578,288. Subsequently to that, we interviewed 3 prospective CM firms, and part of their RFP was to provide us with their cost for CM fee, general conditions, and pre-construction services. We got those prices back today, plugged them into the project costs that we had submitted on Tuesday, and took the middle. We had 3 prices, a high, middle, and a low. We took the middle price, which we thought was the most representative, and the difference was, I think, $117 from the one that we submitted on Tuesday. So it was pretty close. So the estimate currently is at 14,578,405, and I'll defer to Mark as to what he would like to see in the warrant.
So, the library building committee talked about it, and we think 14.6, just to make it a simple, even number, would probably be the right number. Then, that, if you wanted the 13.1 number, your 13 point whatever number you're talking about is with the 1.5 that was already allocated in May, right? So the total cost of the project is 14.6. The town allocated 1.5 in May of that money, and then we have the grant and the fundraising. It's also offsetting that.
So the library trustees are proposing that the article be 13,100,000. And it could be anywhere between 13,078,288 and that number, because as you heard a moment ago through Steve Moore, the number with that additional $117 would be $13,078,405 as opposed to the 288. A lot of numbers thrown at you just now.
A lot of numbers, but do I understand this right, that we're circling the same number plus or minus
Well,
$100,000?
Yeah,
Less than that.
plus or minus 100,000, yes.
Well, right, I mean, we're now rounding up to 14.6, so there's 20 some odd.
Yeah, we were rounding up $20,000.
Yeah, keeping in mind that we're still at 70% design, and this is a draft number that we got from, well, the numbers that we got from the CMs, we plugged into this project cost sheet, but we haven't had the time to go through and look at all the backup to understand if they've given us more than we want, or they haven't given us enough. So if...
But your numbers are also not based on the low bidder, right?
No.
Correct, yeah, they're in the middle bidder. So we feel pretty confident with the number that we have, but it's still a 70% design number.
There is a large contingency built into the,
We do have a aggregate contingency of about $1.3 million
Built in.
built in. Yeah, which is, you know, what, if you subtract that 1.3 million from the 14.6, it's almost 10% of the, total project. Pretty hefty.
Yeah, I did have a question on, so the last presentation we had, we're using 5% cost of construction. I'm looking at numbers, the actual numbers, and it came in at 530,600. Then further down, there's a 557,000 number. It says 5% of construction, and then in parentheses, including escalation. So I don't understand why are those two numbers different? Maybe you can help me if you look on the sheet. I'm referencing the actual spreadsheet that was sent out.
Yep.
From PMB. So you see the escalation is 530, then further down it's 557, including escalation, so I was just curious.
It's, unfortunately, this is a format that the architect put together, and then it was taken over by Vertex, and they put the numbers together a little differently, but kept the same.
The left side the same.
The same description, so.
Okay.
And John and I went over that earlier today, and even if you look at the construction contingency and the project contingency,
Right.
Those are formulas, and if you take the 557, that's 5% of the construction cost. So if you had a spreadsheet and you clicked on that cell, you'd see a formula.
Okay.
So that's why this.
So we don't know what's going on behind it.
Right, right.
So what's your confidence level, Steve?
If we don't have any owner requested changes, I'm pretty confident. Well, my confidence is good, but it's also driven by a comment from the estimator who attended the interviews on Monday of the middle contractor very conservative estimate, is that you won't have any problem building this job for that amount.
What's his name?
We can get that for you.
Always sweet to the top.
Steve, what consideration was given for the slope, essentially? Is it, that's all factored in, and the
It's all
contingencies?
factored in, yeah.
Any unforeseen soil conditions can be absorbed?
Well, we don't have the borings back yet, results of the borings. But I was out here the day that the boring contractor was here, and he told me that he didn't, aside from the first, 4 or 5 feet, which we're gonna remove anyway, which is kind of junk. The bearing soils seem to be all, good sand and gravel, which is exactly what you want to have. So that's hearsay. I don't have any facts to back it up.
When do you anticipate getting the borings back?
When did Phil say that? Next week?
I don't remember.
Yeah,
After Monday.
after Monday, yeah. Unless we can press Phil to get him into us on Monday, we can have him for 10 meeting.
This may or may not be helpful to the process, but if you recall, the last time we had Steve here presenting the options for the funding, within the levy, outside the levy, one of the other discussion points that we were discussing was the fact that when free cash is certified for fiscal 19, which hasn't been yet completed, we're in the process of closing fiscal 19's books and going through those steps. We can utilize some free cash funds and potentially some stabilization funds to offset the total borrowing amount. If we do that, it would require us to have an article at the annual or special town meeting in May. So just as a point of information, if the board wishes to do something like that, which was the finance team's recommendation because it reduces the total bottom line cost of the project, then we will have an article on the May town meeting anyway, just as an information point as you think through how you want to handle this.
That'll actually pay us the short-term interest as well, I believe. That is, in that method that you just mentioned, that money, if we were to use some.
If we choose to use free cash?
The stabilization, we're actually paying down that short-term interest that we would accrue over the next 5 years until we actually bond.
If it gets
In the end,
approved,
it's a
then we'll
huge
borrow.
savings on the other end, so that, it's something we really need to consider. I know, we discuss it a lot, and I already know how Steve feels about interest, but everybody probably feels that way. So I think, just thinking about that money in the spring, we have to really look at that seriously if you're getting this number down to, a pretty manageable situation, especially since it's inside. We're not doing an override. It makes it a little bit more tolerable for sure. We utilize that method. Now, it's going to be, we already talked per the warrant, if you guys are truly, the way that it was written, and I know your reservation, it's probably the same reservations we had, but.
I've said
it is
enough
what it
tonight,
is.
so you can say what you want, Gary, but I'm done.
Okay. So we have, just so that we're clear to the town, I don't know who's presenting this, about the 4 out of 5, 4/5 vote amongst you, if we're thinking of putting this in the spring to putting it in front of the town to decide whether we're going to move it as an override or leave it where it is.
Assuming it passes.
Assuming it passes. So I just think that the whole picture needs to be described to the town, because I think those questions are gonna come up anyway, because the article's confusing to read. If it's confusing to us, and we've been with it the whole way, it's gonna, if that can come out of the discussion when it's being,
Well, because it goes against financial policy. That's why it's confusing, because it goes against everything you guys have supported. So that makes it difficult to swallow.
It does, but we can, like I said, we can go back to the Alumni Field, we go back to the fire station. I'm seeing a trend here, we've had money to do this, to do these things, so we probably need to sit back down and I know we talk about reviewing the policy, and as FinCom Chair, I was reminded today that I can call that meeting, and we can look at the policy, and maybe firm it up so that we're not putting you necessarily in the same situation you were in. We come up with a number, not a solid number perhaps, on what puts something as an override or not, but maybe a percentage of our debt service, whatever we're looking at. I talked to Steve a little bit today, trying to come up with creative ideas. So that's just something I'm thinking about going forward, because this predicament isn't gonna go away. We know the projects that are coming in front of us after the library. The same exact thing's gonna be presented when we're talking about a senior center or a school, so we really, I think, need to come up, without restricting us too much, obviously. We want to have flexibility, but I think we can definitely agree upon right now it states large capital projects will be overrides, and it's guidance. I know
You left off a phrase,
Well,
unless there is a plan otherwise. It keeps getting
Yeah, but-
forgotten in the translation.
I don't want to get into that argument here, but I unless you want to.
No, I mean, it's just, quote it.
So, and I wasn't part of creating that piece of that financial policy, but I think the intent is to have large capital projects
Outside.
unless you're right, unless there's an alternate source of funding, which when I look at it, there's enough ambiguity there that I think it leads me to believe that would be if we were getting grants and things like that, or giving us alternate sources, not necessarily eating our own hand to feed ourselves. So, all that being said, we still have to vote on this as a committee, and I'm not sure. We've discussed this in length. We were really waiting for this number. It didn't look like it changed significantly, so I have a feeling that all of our discussion we've already had is probably pretty much going to stay the same. As a side note, as the FinCom chair, I'm not happy with the article, the way that it's written. And I think it puts the FinCom into this uncomfortable position of almost being turning into a political board as opposed to strictly finance. Because now we have to make a decision on something that we're hoping we can do later on. And that's not a position that we should be put in. So I think when you were creating the article, I know that wasn't probably part of your thought process, thinking about what our recommendation would be, but it does make it very difficult for us to determine on which way we're going to go. And we typically love to be unanimous on votes because I think it shows us strength. But when we get an article like that, it almost makes it so we can't be unanimous on an article like that because it says too much. And that's unfortunate, but I think that type of thing can be avoided if we stick to financial policy and have a clear article. Anyway, I'm getting off the soapbox of that, but I'll let you talk the financials. I've looked at the financials. I think we've all looked at them on where this ends up, strictly the way that the article's written right now. Paul he'll tell you that there's room in the levy for this, and I'm not going to sit here and say there isn't, well inside without having an override. So, how we present that, and I know you're going to have a presentation, you're going to be presenting the article. I've asked, we're going to discuss with our board to really just stick to, I'm not going to present something that doesn't exist yet. In other words, I'm not going to talk about if this goes as an override, because it isn't right now. So I don't want to go into an hour discussion back and forth with people when that's not really what this article is saying right now. But stick to where it is and how we can make it work and what it looks like. And to me, if I get asked a pointed question at town meeting, I'll answer it from a financial perspective. regarding what does it mean when we put any large capital projects inside? Well, it hurts your flexibility to do the next one. Or, you know, so somewhere down the line, we're going to, you know, it would be silly of us not to know what's coming. Something's going to be moved outside. So I'd rather have stronger financial policy in place so we don't have to have the same discussion in a couple of years. And we pit the town, you know, against each other because there's no, when the reality is these projects are all good for Littleton. I mean, at the end of the day, none of this is here to hurt the town. They're all good projects for the town. They're fantastic things. So I think we really need to work on that message.
So I have a question, Mr. Chair, if I may. So with the number that's being presented tonight, after this goes out to bid for construction, are we confident that the project's going to fall within this price point, this cost?
The cost hasn't, well, we had two estimates. We have the 30% design and the 70% design. And between the two of them, the cost went up less than $100,000, including the change for this CM risk. So I think we're pretty close on the ballpark. I mean, we still have the 1.3 in contingencies. I think we're on, I'm pretty confident that the number shouldn't change.
Okay, so in the event it does change, what is our contingency plan? Are we then looking at utilizing free cash? Do we have a?
Well, the purpose of getting the CM at risk on board early, well, as early as we did, it's still late in the game, is that the CM at risk will, as he put it, monitor and manage the architect so that the architect doesn't specify materials that are either because of the tariffs and whatnot going up in price. They've got a much better handle on the commodity market than the architect does. So they have to work to the budget. And so we'll have the CM risk working with the architect to keep us on budget. And that's what the CM risk is, that's what the model is intended to do.
So do I understand this right, that if, at the end, when this is bid and if there was a mismatch between the design and the cost, we would reconcile those first by taking something out of the design, somehow modifying the design to bring it in line with this?
Well, we won't get to that point. We're going to value engineer as we go, so when we get to construction documents, we are on budget. And we're not, as you know, we're not putting this out to bid.
Right.
The construction manager at risk is the contractor, so by the time we get to the construction documents, there is already agreement on the price.
Okay,
And the price can't exceed what you're appropriating.
right.
Correct.
I just was so say something comes out of the blue. We dive into the slope site and we see unforeseen, all of a sudden the cost of the project skyrockets and it's
Indian aerial grant.
Salamanders.
all right?
We can't spend more than the town's allocated, but I would like to say that I don't really want to just say in Article 8 not to exceed, because there are things like add-ons that we might go for extra grants for, and I don't know how we would do that if it's a,
Right.
14.6.
Yeah.
For example, there's a grant, there's a state grant for solar panels, right? That, we don't have solar panels in the budget right now.
Right.
But there's like $50,000 to $100,000 from the state for the solar panels, so let's not say that we can't go for that grant, because now it's gonna put us to 14.7, and we have to come back and do that, right?
Yeah, and I'm not
So
proposing not to
So
exceed
we're not
language
going
at
to
all.
spend more of the town's money than was in this article,
Right.
right?
I guess my point is, so say something happens, sorry, Tom, if something comes and it's now $5 million extra, just out of the blue, do we know where we're gonna get that money from? We don't, right? Until it happens? I'm just asking, so, I heard that.
So, just to be clear, the grant you're talking about did not come from the library commissioners.
No, it would not.
So you're not, the only grants that are deducted from the amount we appropriate come from the Board of Library Commissioners. So if you get a grant from someone else, it can go on top of the money you appropriate.
Okay, so if, even as, okay, I just wanted to make sure that if we got some other money, that we're allowed to apply it to the project, and we don't have to come back to the town meeting.
Well, so there's two ways you could get money, right? You could get a grant from someone,
Yep.
which is a state body or the like. If that's coming from anyone besides the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, you can put it on top of the amount. There, it also says that the amount of any and all gifts, grants, and donations received by the town for this project, received prior to the issuance of any bonds or notes, that comes off, you deduct that from the 13 and change. So if you receive grants after we issue bonds and notes, it can go on top of it. Make sense?
Okay.
Also, can we just touch on what not to exceed means, Tom? Because I don't believe not to exceed is really a binding statement of any sort. Just for whatever that's worth, just for future purposes, not necessarily relating to this article.
Okay, so where are you seeing not to exceed?
We don't have such a language, but it's been discussed a number of different times, or either in, I understand that, for instance, the alumni field, there was discussion about not to exceed, but never did the article actually state not to exceed. My understanding is, even if there was language in this motion that indicated that it was not to exceed, that it could be, technically, it could be brought back to town meeting and exceeded.
Oh, absolutely.
So not to exceed, I just want to dispel some misunderstandings about what not to exceed means. Not to exceed is kind of like a promise, but
It's a promise at a specific town meeting.
Right,
But any
correct.
future town meeting can break that promise.
just want to make that clarification, because I've heard it come up so many times, and I don't
I
know
mean,
if
that's
everyone-
generally true of almost everything, right? The next town meeting can undo.
Yeah, this town meeting can't bind a future town meeting.
I
Mr.
just
Sanders?
have one other comment.
Mr. Sanders, I'm sorry. You can go ahead and don't get to Mr. Sanders.
Okay. The last two projects we've done in town, Alumni Field and the fire station, have both come in below budget. We've had excess that we've turned back to the town.
Mr. Chairman, George Sanders, 672 Great Wood. With this library, when we vote on the 28th, and it gets to 2/3 votes for approval, that means that the town of Littleton is going to build a library. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
That being the case, when you talk about spring going in, saying, do we fund it within levy or do we fund it outside the levy? I believe the state grant is going to get paid to the town within 5 years, is that correct?
Yep.
Over 5 years.
Over a 5-year period, okay? Now, we know in the past, items that we've taken on this project, like the police station, the fire station, and so forth. On the capital improvement, we know that that list became very tight as far as monies that was available to be used for different projects, so forth. The police waited, I guess, quite a few number of years before they got the opportunity to build a police station. We as citizens, we understand you're only going to collect so much money in the town. And we know that there are things that Pacific, we, the people, don't ask the town to buy for us. It's usually the officials that come in and department heads say, well, we would like to have just like the new fire truck engine. We definitely need it because we need the capacity to reach the buildings that are being built at this point in time. The thing I have a little difficulty wrestling with is that if this library can be built within the levy, then I say, build it within the levy, And those things that we need to put on hold from 2 or 3 years when the first payment is due for this library, that's the break of way things happen. Rules and regulation can be in place, and the intent is to try to comply therewith when it's all possible. But if we fall into a situation where we can't just exactly do that, then we have to live with what happened and go on from there and don't cry about the spilled milk. If it is, it can be built in the levy, we ought to tell the people it can be built within the levy, and we're not going to come to you in the spring of the year and say, now, about that library, do you want to pay, continue to pay within the levy, or do you want it outside the levy? I had a colonel who used to say, you got to be smarter than a rock. Who is going to take and raise their taxes to put it outside the levy when it can be paid inside the levy? Just doesn't make good sense. So I'm going to tell the people, so I'm telling you now, I'm going to tell the people, when it comes to the spring, don't do nothing. Let the town figure it out. You already said that we can build it within the levy. All right, let us suffer for a little bit, 2 or 3 years here. It ain't going to hurt nothing. We've done it in the past, suffered a lot longer than 2 or 3 years. We need to ensure that the next time that is talked about and the data is brought forth, when the treasurer come up and tell us, well, you should do this, you should do like this, and when you don't do that, this is the price you pay for. You get something, and they say, we'll pass it, and we'll keep it within the levy, because you know why? The people saying, we deserve a library. We pay our taxes, so by God, build us a library, and you pay for it with the taxes we are paying. Don't ask me to go outside and give you more money. Thank you, sir.
So I think the discussion point is twofold. Number one, what number do we want to put into Article 13's motion? And number two, does the board wish to prepare, albeit late, any further information? Obviously, the library trustees have prepared a presentation. I'm assuming that the Finance Committee will be prepared to discuss finances as it relates to this project. Is there anything further that the board wishes to present on this matter, whether it be the May election vote to explain that, or whether it be, should the board wish to reduce this project cost by 2.4 million or 2.1 million or just 300,000, any combination of the total 2.4 million that exists, and any other detail that,
So let's pump the brakes on spending down free cash and I mean, we're already, by funding this inside the levy, we're already removing some opportunity for us to use funds that we could otherwise use inside the levy. So to present right now, hey, let's go ahead and pay down debt with free cash that we're gonna have. I don't wanna be, I personally don't think that we should be offering that up as a carrot or,
I agree. I think that's got to be part of a comprehensive analysis of where we are.
that's in front of us.
Right, right, rather than just earmark it right now to a particular
Correct.
project. There,
Or promise it.
It doesn't exist.
well,
Correct.
Right.
that,
Oh, that.
that's a limitation as well.
I just feel as though it's irresponsible.
so I'm hearing at least a majority agreement on that, so.
Well, I'll join in. I mean, every spending choice affects other spending choices, and to do something like as a one-off to make a pass at softening the blow, I'm not Deal with it comprehensively is my approach.
But nonetheless, it's an email from you, right, Cindy, who said that we would need a few minutes to sort of present the financials.
Well, we talked about
like,
it. I mean,
structure.
So I guess the bottom line is, and this kind of speaks to some comments Mr. Sanders made, we received financial advice from our finance team that this project should be funded outside the levy. We have that in writing, we received it not once, but more than once. It wasn't a unanimous vote to fund this project inside the levy for the reasons that were provided to us from our financial team, that there are going to be repercussions from this, whether it's larger projects coming down the road or it's short-term implications, with our town departments and the capital spending requests, from our our first responders or whatnot. I know that the language is confusing. I think the way it was drafted was in anticipation of having more information about a senior center, having more information about space needs coming down the road that may perhaps come forward in May. And maybe we find out we've had other things that have come up between now and May that we're like, wow, we really need to move this funding outside the levy and maybe bundle it with space needs and things like that, because maybe that's a sound financial choice at that time. I think really the intent, or my feeling about this language was just to let voters know that we do have financial policies in place, we are provided with guidance. And I know that Paul disagrees with me on this, but I just look at it as we can't keep disregarding our financial team's advice, and I think it does compromise us to some extent with future projects. So maybe eventually we're going to come to a roadblock where we're going to have to start funding things outside of the levy.
Only because I was mentioned by name, I'll say, look, it's not not done without big picture consideration, and nor is it in a lockstep, because at different times, whether it's the police station or the middle school, when the facts present that you really can't responsibly do it under the levy limit, I've been happy to join the crowd for advocating for an override. But at other times, when the finance team or whoever those folks were at the time were recommending doing it outside the levy, such as with Alumni Field, I was happy to disagree with them on that. And I was happy to disagree with them on that for the fire department, too. I think one part of what Mr. Sanders said a moment ago, we ought to think about this. A lot of people in town will walk around and say, when I pay my taxes, that one lump sum, that you should try and think of that in terms of pay all of the bills with that. It's not like you start with that and then you add on something above that. That's a construct of one interpretation of one policy that hasn't even been reviewed in a couple of years' time. So it's kind of a weak hinge to hang everything on. At the end of the day, a lot of folks think that when they pay their taxes, they're doing their part, and that ought to, the onus is on us to figure out how to make both capital and operate under the same check.
Right. So, I guess the bottom line is, so our capital spending budget's been over 2 million for the past 3 years, historically, right? We've supplemented a lot of the money needed to cover those costs through free cash. There is no guarantee with free cash. So what happens when there is no free cash? There's not enough to make up that shortfall. And now we have this project inside the levy, so we've already depleted that figure, that amount of available funds, X amount of dollars, say it's $500,000, or whatever it may be. Whereas if we fund it outside of the levy, we don't have that constraint.
And that's true of every single expenditure that we put on the budget. To segregate this out and say, this is causing anything else to happen, no, it's one of dozens of expenditures we have under the budget, and
So right, so I don't mean to cut you off, but I guess my point is, at what point do we stop? Like, where does the buck stop? When do we start saying, hey, this is what our financial team advised, we're gonna actually listen. And it may not be the popular choice, and I get it, it may seem like double dipping to residents. But you know what? Sometimes the 2.5% that we pay in taxes isn't enough to cover the needs of the town. And I think we're getting to that point. We have space needs coming up, we have seniors, we have an unexpected expenditure to repair the police station. I don't know, I want to get into great detail about what other projects are coming off the roll or debt's going to be paid down. I don't want to get into that much detail because I'm just not that versed at it, but I just am looking at this more of a big picture with what we have coming before us right now. If it was just the library and there was no, we didn't need a senior center, we didn't have to deal with issues in this building, okay, I think we can suck it up, or we're going to have a couple lean years. But we have a lot of needs in this town, I think, that are coming before us beyond large capital projects, even just on the lower, every day, we need new ambulance, we need, equipment for our police department, there's just so many other things. I'm just looking at it more inclusively, and that's why I feel the way I feel, and that's why we put in this language about anticipating bringing this back in May, because we might very well have to bring this back in May and change it, so.
That's assuming it passes. This has not passed yet.
No, I
So a
know.
lot of people are making assumptions that this is foregone and this is going to happen.
Right.
As of right now, there's a lot of people that feel as though I've been using the need versus want analysis, and you just brought it up again, Cindy, and said there's a lot of needs in town. And there's a lot of things, in fact, that we need. And George made the argument about the ladder truck. Frankly, I didn't think we needed one at the time, but a lot of other people did feel as though we needed a ladder truck at the time. We have a library, and everything that I've gotten from any communication from anybody that's advocated for the library has stated how wonderful our library is, and it is. We have a lot to be thankful for and grateful for in the staff, in the funding, in the trustees, and we're pretty far down the road now. We've spent some money, but I still stand by, this is not a need, this is a want. I have concerns about us building this project out on the hill site, and the need of replacing or doing something with this building. There's just so many unknowns that we have right now, and we are where we are. We have to make the decision, but let's not make it foregone. This is gonna pass next Monday.
With all due respect to everyone, what the hell are we debating right now?
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say, I respect everything you're saying right now, but if what we're trying to get at is, should there be a board position?
Well, I mean, it
No,
also-
why?
What we've got to
have
do is
individual
figure out.
opinions on it. Let the people figure.
What are we going to tell to the public? And what we're not going to tell to the public is, if each of us stands up there and steals a microphone, we should all be bounced out of office that minute. What we should be doing at town meeting is giving them the facts. Here is what the article means, and if each one of us,
Well, that's their job.
Yeah.
well, I think in terms of the voting structure, I think that should come from
Well,
us.
and that's where-
Here's what, and it's
That's what
it's
Cindy's
apolitical. This is what the article means, full stop. It's not, is this a good idea or a bad idea? It's just the structure. And then, if one of us wants our turn at the microphone, God bless you. But that's it. The rest of it is up to them. And so I don't know what the hell we're talking about anymore.
Well, I think it kind of alluded to
From us,
what.
you're always going to get a conservative financial picture from us. We're always going to lead you that way because there's a lot of history, on the board that has seen, the town get put in situations, and it's why we have financial policy. So this isn't about, we've never made it about the want, need discussion, and that, selectmen should maybe do that, and the town, let the voters vote on it. But this is strictly, from our point of view, our discussion has always been about how best to finance it based on our financial policy and what gives this team the most flexibility. And that's what we debate about that all the time. So I have to make sure that, this board, we're gonna meet before, that we don't go down the road of what you just mentioned. I don't think it's not good for us to get up there and talk about whether we want it or need it, or we're not gonna do it.
Right.
It's strictly going to be, you're voting here today. If you have questions pointed at what this means financially, I know you're gonna answer some of those questions in your presentation, but it'll just be the same message that I'm giving right now. When you have any large capital project and you put it becomes debt, it hinders your ability later on for another project and another project. So, but that's always going to be the case. So, Cindy, I know you said that we've got a lot of projects coming down the road.
Right.
But I can tell you 5 years from now, there'll be another project, there'll be a school.
And
It's never ending.
Well, and so my point was to speak to why that language is, why the article's worded the
Yeah.
way it is. Not whether or not the libraries are need or want, from my mouth. I'm not going there. I'm talking about the funding mechanism and why we put in that language.
And I think what we say about that is exactly what Gary said. Listen, we put this scheme together because the cost of doing it in the levy is necessarily a certain amount of flexibility. And so down the road, come May, we want to give the voters the choice. Frankly, do you want more flexibility by taking it outside of the levy? Or are you comfortable with the more constrained flexibility of doing it inside the levy?
Right.
That's what the vote is in May.
Right.
And I don't think that's a political statement. I think that's a factual statement. Now, if we start talking about, well, it could mean this, or it could mean that, or this project that I want to see, now it veers off into a land
Right.
that is not helpful to informing the voter at town meeting what this means and how it's structured and why it's structured that way.
Okay.
The trustees are not talking at all about how this is funded. We're just saying it's 14.6, and, and we're breaking the 14.6 up into grant money, gift money, and the money that you already spent, and the money we're asking for now. We are not talking about what inside means, outside means, any of that. That's,
And I think that's on us to explain.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and yeah, you guys are working on 13, so I guess the answer is Chuck and Cindy will address it.
So, yeah.
Jason.
Sorry, Chief.
I'm not that handsome.
Too many Cs on this board.
Mr.
I'll
Sanders?
address it if you want to, but I'm pretty sure Mark doesn't want me addressing it.
Mr. Chairman, George Sanders, 672 Great Wood. I want to get one thing clear. You need to give the people the right terminology when you talk about free cash. There's no free cash. There's no free cows or cash. The money you call free cash, that's taxpayers overpay taxes. That's what that is.
The state calls it free cash.
Well, I'm not talking about what they call it. I'm talking about what it is. It is money that taxpayers has paid over and above, and there's nothing about it free. Now, you take and use the money for many uses. But I just want the people to know, when they hear that word free cash, it is not free cash. It means what Ronald Reagan said, keep their hands out of your pocket. You reach into our pocket and pull out more than what's needed. That's what it means. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Could I just clarify that it's also additional revenue that came in? It's not strictly additional taxes?
All right, so where are we at?
So does this board need to, if this is something that the library's taking care of, do we have to do anything with this?
No, it sounds like
I don't
something
think
that
so.
Chase and
I mean,
Cindy
Cindy
are
and I
gonna-
need to talk, but we're gonna need 90 seconds to 2 minutes to explain.
Clarification.
Yeah, to simply clarify
Right.
the funding structure,
Yeah.
period.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And
that's
then
it.
we don't need to be debating this.
I mean, I would love to see a unanimous vote in support of this article, so we could tell that tell town meeting that we have that. I don't think we're gonna have that. So.
So then we just need the number. Would the board like to go with 13,078,288?
Does that come out to 14.6, Mark?
13 million is 14.6.
13 million flat is 14.6?
13.1 is 14.6.
whatever, I'd say whatever he recommends is the number we should, yeah.
You're
I mean,
comfortable with that?
Yeah, whatever Mark recommends.
13.1 million.
Yep, that would be 13.1 million.
Okay.
Okay, great. So then the last article, Article 14, the number that we have here today is probably the number, but it needs to be final reviewed by the Personnel Board and final decided by the Chief Procurement Officer, who is our Director of Finance and Budget and Town Accountant. Might be slightly greater, most likely won't be less, but just wanted to give you a order of magnitude by putting a number here. Actually, I might put 40,000 in here, just in case it is slightly greater. And then we can always reduce it, but we can't. Well, but this isn't the warrant, so we could go either way. This is not a hard and fast document, so leaving in 38,250 isn't gonna bind you to
I don't think
$38,250. anyone's gonna-
$1,700 changes whether this
Right.
passes or fails.
Right.
I think we need to be prudent, we need to spend what is reasonable, and if that's less than 40, then we spend less than 40, so make it 40 and leave it.
Okay.
Fine.
So at this point, we've gone through the updates, and perhaps the board is prepared to vote. There are a couple motions up here. I think for the last motion that's up here, the second motion, my recommendation would be a modification that just final details be, final clerical language be able to be updated. That would take into consideration the language that we didn't necessarily cite for Article 12 on the PFAS that Chase had mentioned as it related to, clarifying the difference between the warrant article and the actual motion. And of course, you can break this up if the board wants to vote 9, 11, 12, and 13 separately for any reason.
I'm inclined, Joe, if you are
please.
to just make motions for each one,
Yeah.
one at a time,
Yeah.
and leave it at that. I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to support Article 9 in the October 28th special town meeting report updates document.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to support Article 11 in the October 2019 special town meeting report updates document.
Second.
Second. Oh, sorry.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to support Article 12 in the October 2019 special town meeting report updates document.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to support Article 13 in the October 2019 special town meeting report update document.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay.
And then you need this final motion, is that correct, Nina?
Yeah, it would just,
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve as
Modified.
as modified by the town administrator, the special town meeting report updates to be distributed at the October 28, 2019 special town meeting.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Did it?
You want a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for watching.
My out of town meeting.
yes.